Alright, what's going on, guys? With all the hype behind Lies of P, the wait for Lies of P Overture has been a long one. And unless you've been keeping that Legion arm all polished, I imagine many of us are pretty rusty at the game, so to jump into the DLC, we gotta get back on track. Now, Lies of P is full of different tips and advanced combat mechanics that can completely change the way the game will go for you, taking it from a grueling, difficult experience to one that you're now a master of. So today I want to go over some advanced tips to get you back on track in Lies of P as you step into Lies of P Overture. And don't worry, this video will be spoiler free, only showing footage of the first level. But as we get started today, if you want to stay up to date on all things Souls-like news, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and now let's get into it. The first thing I want to talk about today is weapons, because in Lies of P Overture we're going to be getting a lot of new ones, ranging from great swords with shotguns attached, to giant pinwheels that dish out crazy damage, and even a bow and arrow, which I never would have thought we'd see in this game. We got our hands full with stuff to experiment with, and that's exactly what we need to discuss, experimenting with these weapons. Because a big part of Lies of P that many people will likely forget about is that you can break weapons apart and mix and match them. This is not only easily forgotten, but it's incredibly important. I tried out the new pinwheel weapon and it was pretty good on its own. It has a really cool moveset. However, I wasn't crazy about the Fable art, and the blade portion of this weapon was very heavy. So what I thought to do was keep the handle of this weapon, but switch out the blade for the Arch's Guardian blade. And this combination ended up being extremely powerful because the Arch's Guardian blade did very high damage, but had the quick and agile moveset of the pinwheel handle. So don't be afraid to experiment with this because it can come in extremely handy and create a weapon you didn't even know existed. But that leads me into the next tip. Not all Fable arts are just simply new attacks. Many of them can transform your weapons with new abilities, and I'll discuss the Arch's Guardian blade again. This blade has a Fable art that buffs you with lightning, amplifying your damage and giving you lightning elemental damage. But another part of this ability buffs your dodge, giving you this short teleport that is not only spammable, but better than the base dodge. This was super powerful, and potentially a better payout than any new powerful attack could have been. Now, while many of the new weapons will have powerful attacks as their Fable arts, test them all out and figure out exactly what their effects are, because even if it's not putting out a new flashy attack, it might have some kind of effect that can completely transform your game. But sticking on the topic of weapons for now, one of the new weapons is the bow. And I know a lot of you guys are super excited about the prospect of a ranged build in Lies of P. However, while the bow can still perform as a proper weapon on its own, able to parry attacks and dish out decent enough damage, the real hidden utility of this weapon may lie in it not being your primary weapon. And that's because a lot of these regular weapons are going to be putting out much more damage than the bow, but you will find yourself in a situation, more likely than not, where that boss is right about to die, you're right about to die, but it's across the arena. If you can switch to that bow, that will be the difference in the boss dying instead of you. Now, you can either carry it in your offhand at all times, or you can get really good at navigating the weapons menu and equip it as your secondary after creating that space between you and the boss. So keep that strategy in the back of your mind while you're playing through Overture, because it might just save your life. Now, this next one is extremely important to remember. Many of you probably do, but I'm sure there's enough people out there that have forgotten about this, and that is elemental weakness. Using the right elements in combat can drastically change the direction of a fight. Every type of enemy in the game has some sort of elemental weakness, and you really want to make sure you're using the right one. For example, the tyrannical predator here is weak to fire. And I know that because it is technically a carcass enemy type, because it looks like a zombie and it has that sort of blue alchemist experimentation look. Puppet enemy types are weak to lightning. This will do lots of stagger damage to them and is incredibly strong. And human enemy types are weak to acid. Acid is also useful in breaking enemy weapons, and that is also something you're going to want to remember can happen in the DLC. You can break enemy weapons by perfectly parrying their attacks, and you know that's possible by the way it glows red on a perfect parry. Again, that's another aspect of combat people might have forgotten about. Now, this might actually be the most important tip in this video today. Even though Lies of P is a very parry-focused game, this is not Sekiro. The way perfect deflects work is not by simply tapping the block button at the right time. You need to actually hold it down for a little bit, like a quarter of a second. The time it takes for the animation to actually get the weapon in the guarding posture. And then once it's in that posture, then you can tap it, especially when an enemy's doing a long combo. But another reason you'll want to do that is because even if you miss the perfect parry, you'll still block the attack, which is much better than missing your parry and getting hit by the attack instead. But if you're like me and generally suck at parrying, just dodge. There are several boss fights in this DLC that you're better off dodging than parrying anyway. And I know, watching other people play the game, you may think that you have to go into every boss fight, memorize all of the moves, and the perfect parry timings of every single attack. That's just not true. And this may seem kind of counterintuitive, but I found more success in this game as of late when I just gave up on parrying, because it is ultimately more forgiving. It's less rewarding than parrying, but with the link dodge, your survivability is going to go up quite a bit. And there are at least 2 bosses in this DLC where dodging is going to work so much better. Now this one should kind of go without saying, but it needs to be said, because again, so many people just forget to do this, and that is to use the items that you find. Lies of P is not a game where you need to hoard these things. It is extremely generous with giving you useful items, such as ergo crystals, Venini's urgent protection, elemental throwables, elemental buffs, shot puts. You don't need to be afraid to use them. And to be honest, they're pretty overpowered. But the game expects you to use them. So if you're just hard stuck on a boss, but not using any items to give you an advantage, you're really just smacking your head against the wall expecting it to break, when there's a door 3 feet away. Trust me, I know you guys, if you're hoarding all your items, waiting for a rainy day to use them, you're gonna completely forget and end up beating the game without them, and it's gonna have been much harder than it had to be. Next tip that a lot of you guys are going to completely forget about while playing through the DLC is to switch out your defensive units for the element that you're fighting. So if I'm fighting a boss that does fire damage, I may want to equip an amulet or switch my cartridge to something that negates fire damage. The same goes for things like shock, or the new one introduced in the DLC, freeze. Again, this is basic stuff. But I know you guys are going to forget to do this. And I know that because I forgot to do it. Learn from my mistakes. That's the whole point of this video. Now the final thing I want to talk about today is leveling up your P organ. Do not wait to do this. As soon as you find quartz, go back and get an upgrade. Every single time, without fail. It cannot be understated how much having many of these upgrades changes the game. I did an original New Game run and had a pretty good opinion of the game overall, but doing the game on New Game Plus with a maxed out P organ felt like a whole new game. And I would highly recommend speccing into the things that raise your character stats like damage, raise the amount of pulse cells you get, raise your Fable Art charges, stuff like that. I wouldn't worry about things like item slots or weapon slots until you already have the character upgrades, and don't be afraid to respec before starting the DLC if you need to, because again, it cannot be understated how big of an impact those make when you start getting several of them. So before you start the DLC, go check out your P organ, make sure you have good upgrades that you're actually going to use and are going to matter in your gameplay, and don't be afraid to respec. And every time you find a new piece of quartz, go back and get an upgrade. It's worth it. Anyways though guys, those are 10 essentials you need to remember when stepping into Lies of P Overture. I know many of these are likely basic, but I guarantee you forgot about at least a few, because it's been a minute since this game came out. With all that though, if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to leave a like on it and subscribe if you're new around here, and I will catch you in the next one.